Hello, fellow nerds, geeks, and supporters of any pop culture creators. Aaron Nabus here, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Hall H Show. On this episode, we welcome someone that I've gotten to know from Black Comix Day throughout the years, Brian J. Lambert from Wingless Entertainment. He currently has a Kickstarter campaign going on until Friday, March 18th, 2022, for his newest comic book, the finale for Nightfall, a crossover event of over 50 pages of superhero team action to rival what you can find from Marvel's Avengers. Welcome to the show, Brian. It's good to have you here.
Hey, Aaron, man. Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody listening. Thank you for everybody that's already supported. It's been a great time already.
No doubt. This is your first time on the show, and usually we like to do sort of an origin story for our guests who are here for the first time. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a town close to Long Beach. If you know anything about California, or so I should say, if you don't know anything about California, everybody thinks everything is LA. So I grew up outside of LA, along the coast, a little port town called San Pedro.
Oh yeah, I've passed through there a few times.
Yeah, it's really known for the fish market and stuff like that, and longshoring, and it's kind of like it's almost like an East Coast town on the West Coast, but it's great. It treated me well growing up, and so I love it.
What was 11-year-old Brian like? What kind of TV shows did you look forward to, watching as a kid?
So 11-year-old Brian, well, I've always been fascinated with cartoons, and I feel like that's kind of evident from the stuff I put out recently. But that was like the Disney afternoon era. So you had like Gargoyles and DuckTales and Rescue Rangers and Darkwing Duck, and like those kind of shows had kind of taken over. It was right before, Batman the Animated Series came out, and some of the harder, more superhero cartoons and stuff, but I was always into that. I also liked wrestling. I grew up on WWF. I still call it WWF, even though it's WWE. And strangely enough, well, I don't know if strangely enough, but this was the thing we did in the 80s. Soap operas, man. I was like a General Hospital, like
oh my God,
guy.
Dude, my favorite character is Robert Scorpio.
Serious, right? Like, yeah, man. I feel like well, I feel like WWF and soap operas had a lot in common, so I think that's why I like them both.
Yeah, gosh, wow, another General Hospital fan. Who would have thought? Who was your favorite wrestler?
Again, I was born in 81, so like, mid to late 80s was when like my formative years, and I loved like, Junkyard Dog. Everybody loved the Hulk Hogan, you know what I mean, back then. Ultimate Warrior was dope. But my two top guys of all time have to be Shawn Michaels and badass Billy Gunn. Like those are just, you don't get better than that for me. So yeah, I grew up. So I guess a little bit of D-Generation X in there, and crotch chops and whatnot, I guess.
That's always good fun. Obviously you're promoting a comic book for your Kickstarter campaign. What was the first comic book that you read that you remember?
So I had and I still, well, my mom has it somewhere, but she had gotten us when I was young that Prestige edition, Superman versus Muhammad Ali.
Oh, wow.
And I remember, well, so, I mean, I was pretty young, so I didn't really, that's like a kind of a beefy comic book for somebody pretty young. So I didn't read it like when I was a kid, but I used to study the faces because, on the front cover, they're fighting, but in the crowd, it's a bunch of celebrities. And celebrity faces are dotted throughout the crowd, kind of as Easter eggs and stuff like that. And so I remember just like studying that and just poring over that for hours and hours and hours.
How did it make you feel that when you first looked at it?
So it felt like, it felt bigger than life. And then also I feel like growing up, the way I did, like Muhammad Ali was a character that was bigger than life. Like I didn't get to watch him Obviously in his early days fighting and stuff, but I grew up in a house that like revered that. And then that was like the Mike Tyson era. So it's like, well, who would be better, Tyson or Ali? So that was always going on. And so they were kind of these larger than life figures to me. And so seeing him in a comic book, seeing him in something that was like a little bit more relatable to me, like I said, even before I started like actually reading it, was just pretty dope. It was dope to be able to see that. And I hadn't yet made the connection or the distinction of like race and gender politics and some of the things that we see happening now.
Right.
And when people are kind of starting to kind of understand and diversify, I hadn't had those layers. But it was honestly, it was cool to see somebody beat the brakes off of Superman, right? Somebody like who I could, quote unquote, be, um, you know, in a fair, one-on-one fight. I thought
Hmm.
it was pretty hilarious and ridiculous that Superman was boxing with a cape on still. Like all of it was like it was like a real fun book though,
Right. Right.
and so, I just love seeing that. I also like that big prestige format. I didn't know obviously at the time that wasn't the format of comics. So to have these huge pages was pretty dope too. So yeah, it kind of embodied like, I don't know, that childhood wonder to me in a lot of ways.
And I remember talking to Keith, and when I first had him on, and he sort of talked about how the first time he saw Star Wars in the theater sort of had a huge impact on him. Even it even resonates until today with everything that he does. Do you remember watching a movie when you were younger that had sort of that same effect on you?
I'd actually probably have to say Star Wars as well.
Mm.
One of my earliest memories is like Return of the Jedi.
Hmm.
So for years, and I mean like up until maybe like 2 years ago, when they released a couple press releases about it, me and my brother used to argue with people because I remembered a scene in Star Wars in Return of the Jedi where one of the planes, one of the starfighters, flies into the Death Star's shield, and like it's not in any of the VHS, remastered versions and stuff like that. I also remember the scene where Luke was doing the finishing touches on his lightsaber, and that's not in any of the VHS stuff either. So people thought me and my brother were crazy for years, and then like 2 or 3 years ago, maybe five tops, they released like some press releases and some stills that were like, "No, this was in the original cut of the movie,"
Oh.
and so we're no longer crazy. But no,
Yeah.
so I think that I really liked Star Wars. I really, really liked Indiana Jones
Hmm.
because, again, you had some of these like larger than life heroes that were also everyman heroes. Um, so it was pretty cool. I think the one that probably had the most impact in terms of that on my writing, though, would be Die Hard. I'm a huge
Oh,
Bruce. Well,
interesting.
excuse me. Let me readjust. I was a huge Bruce Willis fan up to a certain point.
Uh huh.
And in Die Hard, something real minuscule happens, but it's amazing to me. So one, he doesn't have any shoes on. So towards the end of the movie, when they're doing stuff, Hans is like, shoot the glass. They shoot the glass, so they cut his feet up. But then also, as he's running out of the door, he gets shot in the arm, and he yelps, like he screams, like it hurts. And that's not something you actually normally see in movies. Somebody will get shot in the arm and they but it doesn't really affect anything they're doing. And so that was a really key point for me in that, like, even with this superhero stuff, even with fighting a billion villains, whatever, there are real world consequences for what happens.
Hmm.
And so that really changed how I wanted to write. Like, I still wanted to write these larger than life stories, but I wanted to ground them in some form of reality.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And speaking of reality, sort of like how maybe you can sort of connect the dots between your younger self and to where you are today, in terms of being a comic book creator. Can you sort of walk us through the steps on how you sort of started Wingless Entertainment?
So as a kid, as junior high, high school, that was the Image era, when Jim Lee and those guys and Todd McFarlane and everybody, Eric Larson, all those guys, they launched Image. So that was like a huge thing for me. Also because I feel like every comic book fan everywhere um, was really on that Mutant Genesis run that Jim Lee did.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's my holy grail. Like, I still keep it. I have a copy right next to me as we speak, because if I don't know something technically, or I'm looking for something in terms of lettering or whatever, I go back to that. And so that was really formative for me. But at the time, again, this is pre social media. This is pre Facebook. This is pre MySpace. Even, this is almost pre AOL. America Online. So getting with other like-minded people was kind of difficult. You had like your circle, and so that's what you did. So finding a path into comic book creation really didn't seem like something that was attainable. It just felt like, one comic book creator knew another one and they got hired and they were lucky or whatever, but not something I could, really touch. So I think I went the path of most people. You get a regular, quote unquote, regular job, and you do a regular thing. Um, and I kept writing, but I long since stopped drawing. And I ended up releasing my first novel about 5 years ago, and that was the spark that kind of lit it all. I was fortunate enough to win an award for that novel, um, and then I started linking up with people again. Now we're in this age of Facebook and social media, and where you can connect with somebody from the Philippines or Italy or wherever. And I just started talking to people, other people, like-minded people who wanted to do comic books and were trying to figure out their own way. And I quickly realized that, like, Marvel, DC, Boom, Image, any of them, they're not the only path, right? Like, if they tell you no, that doesn't mean your dream is dead. It just means you find a new way. And since I already had somewhat of a background in self-publishing, I just started down that path, and I just really, really wanted to do it. And I really stuck to it, learned about the process of creating comic books. I'm fortunate enough to have a degree in creative writing and a master's degree in business. So both of those things really, really helped understand how to navigate, price points and crafting a story so it makes sense in 22 pages. Just all the little things that really make what we do stand at a level of the bigs. I was able to do that.
Nice. That's I think you're fortunate to have both a degree in writing and a master's in business. That's incredible.
Thank you. It was with not without its perils. No, I was very fortunate. I got my degree later on in life, which was better for me. Um, I went, I did the junior college thing because I didn't know what I wanted to do,
Hmm.
and I wasn't really focused. And if I had really tried to go get either one of those degrees at the time, I would have flunked and I would have failed out. So it wasn't until later on in life where I really knew I wanted to do it, and I got an awesome opportunity. I graduated from Full Sail University, which was great for me because it's online and you can, you're basically telecommuting, and things like that. And so that worked into my schedule with work and everything else. And so again, I was very fortunate to have that opportunity and to kind of be able to take the time to do it.
Hmm. Now, you call your company Wingless Entertainment. I mean, I guess it could have been Wingless Comics, but why did you decide to call it Wingless Entertainment?
Because Wingless Entertainment started and still is the parent company. I started Wingless Entertainment because I knew I wanted to publish a book and I knew I wanted to do more,
Right.
but I wasn't exactly sure what that more, quote unquote, was gonna be. So I started Wingless Entertainment. I've dabbled in some animation and a couple other things, and so it just made sense for it to be that. Now, Wingless Comics, as it stands, has gotten the most notoriety, for lack of better words, as it stands right now. Again, I'm very, very fortunate with Wingless Comics and setting these things up. I started out with another independent publisher called Concrete Comics. And then I moved on from there and was able to launch Wingless Comics as its own creator-owned entity. And Wingless Entertainment is obviously still there. It's still doing things in the back. The Wingless Entertainment side of what I'm doing now just takes a lot longer. Comics are not easier to produce, but I've done them long enough to where there's a pipeline. There's kind of set time limits that I know I can hit, whereas animation and some of these other projects take quite a bit longer.
Hmm. Now, where do you see Wingless Entertainment in the next 5 years?
Ooh, next 5 years. Next 5 years, we will have definitely progressed into the animation realm. Most likely both traditional and CG. Um, what else? We have a couple more projects, but Wingless Entertainment will definitely be the multimedia side of Wingless Entertainment will be much more prevalent. That doesn't mean that I'll ever stop doing comics. That doesn't mean that that goes anywhere. It's just that the other ventures will be more solid in 5 years, and really, just pouring back into that entire creative community that we respawned from.
So, do you sort of envision like Wingless Comics sort of providing the IP for the entertainment side?
That's what most of it is. Like I said, I have my novel, which I'm probably gonna do a twofer for that and end up doing a graphic novel version of it, and also launching the IP in some other ways. Wingless Comics is definitely on track and on brand to be the IP launch and to pull from that side, and that is part of the plan. If nothing else, in modern society, comics can definitely be used as storyboards and as proof of concept,
Mm-hmm.
which I think are very important. And when you're putting together pitch documents, which a lot of us don't know, a lot of times now you do need proof of concept. It used to be okay to just have just the pitch document itself, and give some info about your characters, and this is where I want to go, and here's a sample script. But they really want to see proof of concept. They really want to see that there's that draw there for it that makes it unique. It's especially when we're in a world, we're swimming in a world of superheroes and fantasy. With Marvel, with HBO, with all these different companies. So you've got to be prepared to stand apart from that, or to prove that you're ready to jump right in that same, in that same ring with them.
Right. A lot of people start things without really a solid, passion behind it. They're probably just doing it just to, keep up with other people. But, it seems like the best ideas that have lasted long have sort of like they have a solid why behind them. What's your why behind, why you created Wingless Entertainment?
My original why, and again, this goes back to, and I keep alluding to it. So my novel is called Ascension: The Crucian Saga, Book One. The reason it's got this long, lengthy title is because, like we were saying with Star Wars earlier, right? Certain things just kind of change who you are and what you are fundamentally when you dig into them. I feel like. I feel like Tolkien's writing did that. A lot of people love The Lord of the Rings. I love The Silmarillion. In some editions of the Silmarillion, Tolkien explains how England doesn't have its own mythology. He explains there's Norse, there's Egyptian, there's all these other groups, but England doesn't have one, and so that's what he set about to create in some ways with the Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion, to create this whole mythology and this whole story. And as I was reading that, it struck a chord because being an African American man in America, right? We don't have a mythology either. Now there are some folk tales. There are stories about honestly heroic people that lived, but no mythology. And so when I started writing the Crucian Saga, that was my point, to create an African American mythology, and then kind of to move forward. So my why has been always to create the things that we are lacking, and I don't mean the superficial elements. I mean the real historical kind of elements that people end up. Uh, Kind of carrying on for you. We've seen it with Star Wars, where they did the first three, right? And then they did the prequel three. And before they did the sequel three, you've had all of these, in universe stories, expanded universe. People kind of took up the mantle of Star Wars and wanted to push it forward. So that's why there was so much pushback when they finally did the sequels. Like that, I wanted to build something that was beyond me. And I don't mean in the monetary sense. I mean in the sense of other people can take jump points from what I wrote, or build upon this world that I created and expand upon it, and so that the little kid that's two generations behind me doesn't grow up the same way and have that same realization that I did, that we didn't have a mythology, we didn't have a, Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a anything. I wanted to try to fill that gap, because it's a storytelling brand and tradition that I love. But again, I grew up being excluded from it.
Mm. Now, Wingless Comics isn't just yourself. You have a team behind you, right?
Yes. So Wingless. Okay. So Wingless Comics is patterned honestly after Image Comics.
Hmm.
Wingless Comics is the big branding. Wingless Comics is the umbrella. Uh, Beneath that umbrella, you have myself, who does Justice and has so far written Nightfall. Also under that umbrella, on the next kind of rung is Malachi Bailey, who is the author of Her. Brett Hillisham, who is the author of Immortalis. He is also the president of Indie Comics Dispatch. Also, we just added Lawrence James King, who is the president and CEO of Constant Hustle Comics and also the creator of Avery the Astonishing. We also have J.L. Johnson, who is the creator of Iniad, and he will be writing and producing the Saber Initiative for us. We have a couple secret ones that I can't really say yet, but there are going to be some more announcements of production from Wingless Comics in the very, very near future as well.
I guess we'll have to have you back on the show to discuss that. Awesome. We'll definitely, talk about Nightfall. But before we do that, we usually have something called the Thunder Round, which is like a round of random questions. Ready?
Okay. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, let's go.
All
I
right,
like it.
man. What's the last song you sang in the shower?
Ooh, oh, why would you? Oh man, Ariana Grande, break up with your boyfriend.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool.
Horrible, man. Who does that?
What's one thing you hated as a child but love now as an adult?
Peppers. I used to hate like those like yellow peppers.
Like bell peppers? Like,
No, what the little small ones?
oh, the spicy
God,
ones. The like
yeah,
the
I
the
cannot call
Tiber
up their
chili,
name right
the
now.
Tiber chili peppers, or
Yeah, I used to hate them, and as I've gotten older, I'm like, this is the most delicious thing in the planet.
uh, or talk about those peppers that you find at In and Out, like those type of peppers.
All of them. I
Oh,
like
okay.
all of them. It's just the most ridiculous thing ever. And if
Mm,
again, if you knew me as a kid, I didn't want them anywhere near me.
right.
But I love all peppers now as a the smaller ones as an adult.
Interesting. All right. Well, I guess that's not your kryptonite anymore. But that was my next question. What's your kryptonite?
Ooh, what is my kryptonite? Honestly, kind of spreading myself too thin.
Ah,
I feel like most writers, you get an idea and then you get another idea and then you get another idea and you get another idea. And as opposed to like writing them down like a normal sane person would do, I think I can do all of them at once, which is it's just not true.
mm. Yeah. As a designer, sometimes I got to be careful on how many clients I work on at the same time. So
Right, right, right. It gets hard as this creative, that creative mind, right? Like because
yeah.
you can see it all happening, and
Hmm.
so you're like, oh, I got to step on this now, and then you get another idea because you're doing that, and it's
Right.
just yeah, it's hard.
There seems to be a massive disconnect when it comes to the big two, meaning Marvel and DC, when sort of looking at their box office revenue and the revenue from their respective comic book lines. What do you think could be done to better, bridge the gap between those two, I guess, entities?
Mm. I actually don't think that they should bridge the gap. Um, Only in so much that they are two very different forms of entertainment. Now,
Uh-huh.
obviously, anyone can enjoy both or neither or whatever. But I think what Marvel is doing for cinema is good. Their side of cinema is great. It's running like a well-oiled machine, like it was set up to be. So I think that we get the story thrills and chills from that, and I think that that's great. I think that sometimes chasing after the movie dollar in comic book form is bad because it doesn't lead to good stories. It leads
Mm.
to uh, there's an image I'll never forget now, and it's Doctor Doom, but he's like Doctor Doom, the Juggernaut, and he just looks like an egghead. And it's because they wanted to mash up all these characters because how would that look on screen later? They think it would look cool, but it really didn't. I think that DC also suffers from. I think they have some good ideas, but DC is always going to suffer from being at the heel of Warner Brothers. Now, again, for good or for bad, Warner Brothers is going to tell them what they want to do, and they exert more control than, let's say, Disney does over Marvel. So until they figure that part out, they're going to be what they're going to be.
Yeah.
Also, both universes um, basically rebooting their universes all the time.
Right.
It's annoying, right? Like, and I get it. There are hundreds of issues of Superman. How do you pick up blah 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 blah? Like, stop trying to. All the reboots that they do aren't reboots. It's like a soft reboot and a this and a that. And if you're talking about Spider-Man, you're talking about Superman, you're talking about Batman, maybe not Wonder Woman, but now Captain America, Wolverine. There are a couple people like we know their origins. We don't ever need to see it again. You can
Mhm.
just tell a story about them. Um, and I think that they, in my opinion, it's funny because the movies have taken scripts and cues from the comics, right? And now the comics are trying to take cues from the movies, which doesn't make sense because that would mean they're just taking cues from themselves. And I think that's one of the reasons why the stories don't always feel fresh because they're just retelling their own kind of stories.
Yeah, it's going back to your comment about Warner Brothers. I was really looking forward to Ava DuVernay's New Gods movie.
Hmm.
Um, I wanted to see like a real Jack Kirby experience.
Yeah, yeah, and then
Um,
that got just demolished.
right? Yeah. Um, and yeah, uh, and also regarding your comments about Marvel and DC restarting their universes. I mean, I collected comics heavily, like from the '80s to the late '90s, and it was the Onslaught thing
Hmm.
that made me stop collecting Marvel. So,
Yeah,
and I took a huge break from comic books at that point until kind of just recently.
yeah, yeah. I loved. Okay, I loved parts of the Onslaught
Uh-huh.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Like there are a couple iconic scenes, and I thought Heroes Reborn was going to be really, really cool just because of the art, right? Like who they got to do the art. I was like, oh man, when I saw Jim Lee draw Iron Man,
Hmm.
that was the first time I had ever seen him draw Iron Man, and it looked amazing. But the story was so thin, it just didn't make sense, at that point. And I think that, between that one, I think the New 52 was horrible. Um, what was the other one? There was another one that was again. I feel like a lot of them are just unnecessary. They're going to kill off the Justice League in just a little bit. They were saying, but like again, look after Superman died. Okay, we know you're not killing Superman. Like we know that's not going to happen. You're going to bring him back. So like, I don't want to say why waste the time, but why waste the time? And I mean in the larger form and drawing it out and acting like it's going to be this big crazy event that you're never going to go back on. Like that's a lie.
Mm,
So don't do it.
right. um, what word would you use to describe yourself?
Tenacious,
Hmm. And what word do you think other people would use to describe you?
arrogant.
Oh yeah, really?
Uh, you know, um, yes, and I don't. I used to take offense to it, right? I
Uh-huh.
used to be like, "Oh my God, somebody thought I was arrogant." So I feel like if you are attempting to be arrogant or attempting to prove that you are better than people, that's one thing,
Yeah.
right? And you should check your how you're doing in your privilege. But if your standard of who you are in general threatens some people or how you speak or whatever it is that you do threatens people and you're not going out to threaten people, that is not your fault. And so there is a huge difference between, arrogance, confidence, self-assuredness, all of that stuff. And a lot of that gets confused. I feel like if you have good intentions, and people misconstrue how you are sometimes, and that's on all ends of the spectrum, that's okay, because you always have a chance to go back and redress that. If you literally have good intentions, the person who immediately might think you're arrogant once they get to know you is like, oh no, he's not. He's just driven. Again, I'm tenacious, and I feel like I have to be. We're in an indie market, and we are going in against the big two. And this is a 1. I think 5 right now that they're estimating $1.5 billion industry, right? Like to
Mm-hmm.
even get 1% of that as an indie would be amazing, right? So we're fighting for a tenth of a tenth of a tenth of a percent. So I feel like you do have to be audacious sometimes, and you do have to be tenacious, and you do have to go after it. And everybody is not always prepared to see that in every facet of life. In certain facets, we're used to seeing it with a football player. We're used to seeing it with a Fortune 500 company. We're used to seeing it with whatever. We aren't always used to seeing it with a guy who does independent comics.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Um, if you could have a meal with anyone alive now or from history, who would it be with, and where would you take this person to eat at?
Hmm. Hmm. It's going to sound sappy, but it's something that I would want as an adult. I wish that I could go out on a fishing trip with my grandfather.
Mm.
So my middle name, I'm named after my grandfather. And we were really, really close from what I know. But he died when I was like 1.5 years old. But like that entire time, like, he was the one who watched me. He ate with me, all these really cool things. And basically everybody who's older than me in my family has that memory of him. And he was such a revered person in our family, and he did so much for our family. And he was such a strong man, and the World War II veteran, and all these cool, amazing things. And I just never got to have a conversation with him. And I always regret that. Even though it's out of my control, I just really wish I could have it. So given the chance, I would go out on a fishing trip, and we cook the fish after, and I'd have a long conversation with my grandfather.
Mm. I can sort of relate. I mean, I've only met my grandparents a handful of times, if maybe actually more like a couple of times, because they're in the Philippines, so
Mm.
I didn't get a chance to grow up with them like a lot of my friends did, with their grandparents. So that's one thing I sort of regret. I wish I'd gotten to know them a lot better.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a bond that I feel like that's a bond like unlike any other. I feel like there are two bonds, family bonds, that I think are very, very like precious, and all of them are, but like these, top it. And I think it's grandparents, and I think it's aunts, right? Because like an aunt loves you like your mother, just without all the baggage, right? She doesn't know that you had to be disciplined for your grades, or you tried to sneak a girl in the house, or you know what I mean, like all that stuff. She doesn't judge you for that, but she has that same love that your mother has for you. And I feel like grandparents are the same. They love you like your parents love you, but they don't have all the baggage. They don't have the day to day. You have an attitude. They had an attitude. It's just this purely kind of wholesome uh, thing that you're not going to get anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, it's speaking of aunts. If it wasn't for my dad's aunt during World War II, my it would be my grandma's sister. They were scrambling to evacuate because the Japanese were coming, and inadvertently my dad was left in the kitchen table,
Mhm.
and so if it wasn't for his aunt who went back to go get him, I probably would never been born because, at the time the Japanese were throwing babies in the air and killing them with bayonets. So
Mm. Yeah, see,
that's
it really is. I don't know. There's something special about it, and that is an amazing story.
yeah.
One, but like again, where are you going to get that? Where are you going to get that love and that tenderness?
Hmm. Um, what's something new that you recently learned?
Um, Learning, if that can be the thing. So I'm learning how to color
I saw that. I
comics.
saw that.
I love it. It's that for me is more of a hobby than anything, I guess. Or, yeah, I'll call it a hobby only because I'm not sitting, around 8 hours doing it. But it's something I really, really love. It's super dynamic. It's very humbling because, one moment I'm like, yeah, I got it. And then, I don't, because, somebody will come and say, hey, you should do this, try this trick. And so it's something that I get to continually learn, which is pretty awesome. I love and I enjoy that part. And just seeing your characters kind of come to life is pretty awesome
Hmm.
from your own hand,
Yeah.
too.
So I guess you learned how to draw first, and then you started writing. Is that how the progression went?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As a kid, I used to, I drew a lot as a kid.
Hmm.
And mostly it was, what kids do. I was copying pictures and, you know, Wolverine's dynamic pose here or there.
Right. Right.
Um, and I, I, I I had always been a writer as well, but not in a serious, real form. I feel like every kid goes out and is like, "Oh, I'm gonna write," my superhero. Every kid. I feel like if it's not your superhero, it's your skateboarding adventure. It's something, right? Like we all write. Um, I had a little bit of a knack for it, according to a couple of my teachers, but I never really thought I was all that good at it. As I got older, my late teens, I started writing some music. Excuse me, I should say I started writing lyrics, not like orchestration. But I became a lyricist a little bit, and that's just kind of how I kept up the writing part of it. The art part of it kind of fell to the wayside between the job and everything else. I also didn't think I was good enough because there are some amazing, amazing artists out there. and they could just do it from their head. And I hadn't really practiced enough to be there. So I kind of got disheartened, which is one of the reasons I moved away from drawing. Uh, Picked up the pen and kind of never put it down after that.
Mm-hmm. If you could teleport to anywhere in the world right now, where would you go, and why did you pick this place?
Wait, can I teleport out as well, or just like, do I just go there and I stay there?
Oh, you can go there and stay there if you want, but you can come back as well.
Oh, I wanted to come back because this is gonna sound horrible, but I'm gonna go to the Federal Reserve in New York
Uh huh.
because there's gold in the bottom,
Yeah,
and I'm gonna take like 4 bars and then teleport out.
just 4.
Yeah, well, because they're heavy. So as many as I can carry comfortably. Right, I'm not gonna get greedy.
Uh-huh.
Also, I just need a little bit of seed money. I don't need to create the whole business.
Right. So is that going to go towards Wingless
Yeah,
Entertainment?
100%, man, 100%.
What's more important, originality or giving readers or an audience what they want?
Ooh, I feel like that's a nuanced question. The reason I feel like it's a nuanced question is because I feel like people don't know the difference between tropes and cliches now.
Mm.
There are, and I know you've seen it in some of the Facebook groups and conversations we're both in. People will be really down on tropes, right? Like I hate the title could be I hate tropes, and then people will comment on there, but all the comments will be talking actually about cliches, not tropes,
Mm.
right? Like, so I think that tropes themselves, there's a reason they're tropes because they've been used since the beginning of time because these are stories that we want to hear, types of stories that we want to hear, tales that we want to hear. Do we want to hear it the same way? No. Do we want the cliche ending? Not necessarily. But on the other end of that, when you have originality, you have some of these great stories. I think of like Old Boy, right? Like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
that's a great, like, it's not like a super original story because it's, about revenge, but it is very original in how it's told. But then you have something like Ichi the Killer, and I don't know if anybody has seen that, but that movie is just bonkers. Um, and it's very original, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily good overall, story wise. Um, So I think there needs to be a mix of both. I don't believe there's any new story, under the sun. It's about revenge. It's about a boy meeting a girl. It's about, those things. Again, the trope part of it, um, I think is going to be redone. But how you tell that story, you can't just rip off Superman, right? Like, but Superman is also not a very original story. A displaced person ends up becoming the hero. He saves a bunch of people all the time. Oh, we've heard that a bunch of times, right? Like that could be Moses if you know what I mean. Change one or two things.
Right.
The story of Moses. So again, I'm not saying big deal. I'm saying how you treat any story, whether it be cliche, whether it be a trope, whether it be original, whether it be unoriginal. How you tell that is what determines its value.
Hmm. That's true. Um, if you could tell your younger self, let's say the younger self that's a senior in high school, one thing, what would it be?
Ooh, invest in America Online.
Wow, America Online, huh?
Yeah, yeah. So I remember, and I was in college by this time, but America Online had gotten big enough to buy Warner Brothers. Now, don't get me wrong. 2 years later, the bubble burst and they were out of there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But when America Online first started, it was going for it was under $1 a share, right? So if in high school I had bought $100 worth, by the time I got to high school, I'd be 100 bajillionaire.
Huh. It's funny you mentioned American Online because uh, during the, I guess, later parts of the .com, boom, I was working for a company up in Orange County, and after American Online sort of went bust, our company started hiring some of their employees. So it was kind of funny. Like we started calling it American Online West or something like that.
Nice.
Wow, that just brought back a bunch of memories.
Right.
If you could curate a list of TV shows that would give a person an idea of, who you are, what TV shows would they be?
Ooh, I think it would be a mix of a bunch of things. New York Undercover, Night Court, Knight Rider, A Team,
Okay.
A Different World, Homeboys from Outer Space, Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah.
Um, there are so many good ones, but I
There
feel
are.
like
Yeah.
those run the gamut. Oh, Moonlighting.
Oh wow. Well, you are a
Um,
Bruce Willis fan, or were?
Yeah, right, right. Yeah. So my claim to Bruce Willis fame is actually Moonlighting. There's a scene in Moonlighting. I think it was in the second season. I can't even remember now. It's so
Yeah.
long ago. But they filmed it right outside my house, my apartment building, when
Oh
I was a
wow.
kid, and that was like the moment. All it is like literally like a car comes around the corner. It's like nothing, but for me, like that was a moment. You know what I mean? Like there were cameras, and it was Hollywood, and it was celebrity, and it was Bruce Willis, and so like that was the moment for me.
Yeah. I mean, A Team and Knight Rider definitely resonate with me because when I moved back to San Diego from Puerto Rico, I think it was like back in '83 or something like that. You know, '84 between then and like the next few years, like A Team, Knight Rider, all those shows were a big part of my childhood.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and yeah, Cheers I didn't get into until much later in life. Like
Mm,
I didn't have an appreciation for it when it was on. It was only during syndication that I sort of got into it. And
yeah.
then like I don't know if you ever watched Frasier, but Frasier's is brilliant.
Yes, Frasier. Yeah, I love Frasier.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So two things, right? So A Team actually, remember when A Team they it wasn't like a relaunch, but it was in between seasons. Um they had gotten free, and then they got locked up or whatever again, and then the beginning of the new season they broke out of prison. So I lived in San Pedro, and they have the Korean Bell up there and all that stuff. And they actually filmed the breakout scene from A Team up at the Korean Bell. So as a kid, I got to watch it being filmed again. So it was one of those really, really cool things, and like meeting Mr. T and that kind of a thing. So that was super awesome as a kid. And then Cheers. Only reason I used to watch Cheers as a kid, and I still didn't get the jokes as a kid. Yeah, like you, it wasn't until syndication that I understood the jokes. But my mom loved this show, and as a child, I used to sing the opening to her because I knew she loved it.
Mm.
And so, like, no matter where I was in the house, I could be upstairs and I'd come leaping down the stairs because Cheers was on, and I had to sing her the opening theme.
That's awesome. I know we talked about Superman and Muhammad Ali comic book earlier, but is there another book that had a profound impact on you?
Two actually. Like I said, I mean, I don't know if they're technically books. They are now, so I should actually say three. Mutant Genesis, that whole run, that it's like an 8 issue run, I guess that gets counted as that whole thing. Um, when they launched the X-Men Blue Team, and the return of Magneto, and the first appearance of Omega Red, just Jim Lee's art on that was amazing. And it was, for me, it was groundbreaking. Uh, Prior to that, I had been into like DC, which was more. It still looked kind of like the Silver Age, Golden Age style. Um, and this is my first time jumping over to a Jim Lee style.
Mm.
And it was so impactful to me. I had never seen anything like it, and it was just the best thing ever. The second one that really made an impact on me was the Executioner song.
Mm.
That was the first crossover I had really, like, I don't want to say been alive for, but I was into comics for it. Like that was the first time I had seen, oh man, I got to wait a week and this next comic is going to come out, and it's number 2, but it's X Force, and this number 3 is X Factor, and doing that whole thing. And it was a pretty dope story. It ended pretty well. And I was like, it was just very, very intriguing at the time. And it really helped me kind of dig into like long form storytelling,
Yeah.
which was pretty dope. And lastly, The Death of Superman. Um, I love that book. I don't necessarily like all the story beats, but I did like the fact that it was like this really strong guy comes from nowhere, and him and Superman fight, and there's no real rhyme or reason. We don't, there's no real overarching plot. Um, uh, Dan Jurgens, and those guys, man, they just did a great job. That whole last issue is all splash pages, and it
Hmm.
took me, as a kid, I didn't understand the gravity of that, but as I got older, I was like, dude, this is a whole book of splash pages. This is, it's just done so well. That image is iconic of his cape half on the flag on that pole,
Yeah.
and half not, and he's dead. It's just, yeah, I loved it.
Did you after going through it, did you think that he was going to stay dead?
Um, no. And okay, so as a kid, I was glad, right? Because like as a kid, I was really sad, like, oh, like he's really dead. And then they came out, yeah, obviously with Reign of Superman and all that stuff. But I liked again, there was a storytelling mechanic that I really liked that they did in there. And that was like if you were reading the comics as they came out, even when Doomsday was debuting, it was only a one panel thing at the bottom of Action Comics. You know what I mean? For like 6 issues where he's like punching the wall.
Mm-hmm.
All you saw was like that one stretch of panels. And then it was the next comic, it was another stretch of panels. So then when you got to like Reign of Superman, some of the things that like if you get the collected editions now, you'll see like Clark going through these different things in one comic book. But they were telling it page by page in other books as it was happening, like in real time.
Right.
Which I thought was a dope story mechanic. One, it was a kind of a money grab because they wanted you to buy all the comics. I get that, and that kind of sucks. But just the kind of the way they wove the story in and out of everything else was pretty damn awesome. But I also was like, how are they going to kill Superman and keep him that way? I didn't know that they were going to bring him back necessarily, and the effect that it was going to have on comics in general. But I was like, he can't be just gone. That's just he's Superman.
Right. Like I was like, one, I was in shock that they actually killed him off, but at the same time, I was like thinking, there's no way they can just, this can't be it. No way.
Yeah. And I will give them props. It was like a year before Reign of Superman and all that came out. Like they stuck to their guns for a while. I feel like as long as they could before, bursting.
Right. Now, did you like the Superman with long hair?
As a kid, I really did.
Yeah.
As a kid, I thought it was so cool. And then I go back and look and I'm like, why did we like that? Like the super mullet. It was weird.
Yeah. But I did dig the black suit. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. I think that's always been a classic. So I like that they brought out a version of it in the Snyder
Snyder
verse.
cut.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's true. Speaking of the Snyder universe, I mean, I don't know what else is going to happen to it, but has it seen its last hurrah?
I think so. I mean, unfortunately so.
Yeah.
I don't know how they bring it back. I think that, and this is not DC's fault, but I think that losing Henry Cavill is the biggest blow to all of it, right? And then you lost Ben Affleck too, and people are always going to be, iffy about Batman and Ben Affleck himself, but overall the performance was good. He fit the character that they were portraying, and on and on and on. Gal Gadot is amazing as Wonder Woman.
Yeah, she is.
If anybody watched Wonder Woman the first time, like the first Wonder Woman, and didn't fall in love with her like 3 times throughout that movie, like you weren't watching the movie. She's super dope as the character.
I thought she was dope in Batman versus Superman.
I did too.
Yeah.
I like everything about Batman versus Superman except for the last third of the movie.
Yeah.
And the only reason I don't like the last third of the movie, I think that even if they had done the same exact thing, but instead of it being Doomsday, it was Lex Luthor in a power armor.
Yeah.
I think it would be a great movie. Like even the Martha thing, they could have just switched up and said he could have said like he's gonna kill Lois. Batman knew, you know what I mean? Like he would have been like, oh, okay, I'll go save Lois. There were a couple little things that they could have changed, and it would have been, top tier. What things happened? With the success of Peacemaker, and Marvel losing James Gunn after Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Now, I'm not saying that the tone should be the same, but I feel like they should probably give James Gunn the same kind of authority that Kevin Feige has.
Yeah. I hear you.
Right?
That's the thing they're missing over there. It's the Kevin Feige.
Yeah, exactly. And they tried to do it with Jeff Loeb, but and don't get me wrong, I've read a bunch of Jeff Loeb comics. I loved his run on the Batman Superman when they relaunched that. But Jeff Loeb is also like a Silver Age. Like he's like a fanboy. He'll even say it. He's a fanboy for the Silver Age. The Silver Age is cool, but it also had a lot of really, really dumb ideas. And Loeb sometimes latches onto those kind of ideas, and that is death for a movie franchise. You can't translate some of that. Like no one wants to see a Batman Superman composite robot.
Right.
Period. Like it's a stupid gimmick. But, if you see it in a comic book and it's like wink, wink, then that still works. In cinema, it doesn't.
Right. That's all good points. And I totally agree. What's the importance of ownership of your own properties and platforms, especially as a Black person?
Um, Everything. What's the importance? The importance is everything. And I know that sounds like a simplistic answer, but it's really, really not. There is a quote that is basically like, "Until the lion learns how to write, the stories will always favor the hunter." And that's the essence of all of these things. I have a friend who is Pacific Islander, and you know, I didn't realize it, at first, but we went to a bar and it was like the tiki room, and they got really pissed off, and I didn't really understand the gravity of it, you know, because I don't go into things thinking like, oh man, somebody's still doing like a racist trope that's been done for 100 years, but it literally happens in front of people. You get, people coming out in grass skirts and blah blah blah, and someone's culture is a costume as opposed to appreciating the art of that person's culture. So when you own your own platforms, when you own your own podcasts, when you own your own TV shows, when you own your own whatever, there should be no one that is outside of that culture making influential decisions about that culture. And I think that that's a very important point that doesn't get hammered home. It is not that one culture necessarily wants to 100% exclude another culture. There are always going to be people that say, exclude them or whatever, but that's not at the heart of things. At the heart of things is telling a genuine narrative about who you are. When you have someone like 50 Cent, he is doing amazing. He's 3 or 4 shows on there, on and on and on, and I would never take that away from him. Good job. Now, would the shows have the same content if a Black person was in charge of the network? Right? Because the shows boil down to drugs, killing, more drugs, gangster.
Hmm.
Okay, cool. I don't have a problem with those stories. I like those stories too, right? But I want to see the other stories. And he has branched out. He's producing, or they're developing that comic, former DC comic. Um, I can't call up the name right now, but I think it's Christopher Priest's comic, and they're developing that. So again, we as a society have come to say that, okay, Pacific Islanders can play football, Black people can sing and play basketball, white people can play baseball and be lawyers. All these little groups of people, and this is what they can do, and this is what they do. But when you dive into different cultures and you really dive into those cultures, you see that all these people do all these things. And so that's important. It's important that the people who are being represented by said culture that's on said platform actually have a voice in it. Because for a long time, for hundreds of years, none of us have.
Right. And I just looked up that comic book by Christopher Priest. Christopher Priest. It's Zero.
Okay, yes. That's such an easy name. How did I not know
Well,
that?
it's spelled weirdly, so it's XER
Okay.
and with a zero slash. So
Okay.
awesome, cool. I guess we'll switch gears and talk about Nightfall, your comic book.
Oh, ooh, yeah. Yeah, I got one of those too.
Yeah, yeah. If you were at a comic convention, how would you describe Nightfall to people walking by your table?
So Nightfall is a crossover between Wingless Comics and Constant Hustle Comics, and basically our heroes come together because the evil wizard Merlin is trying to destroy the world. He's trying to resurrect the ancient Egyptian serpent god Apep, who is destined to devour the earth. In order to stop that, our heroes have to come together and actually figure out who's on what side, and how to prevent the end of the world as we know it.
Wow, almost like Ragnarok in a way, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I do, if I'm talking to people who are not comic book aficionados,
Uh-huh.
I will tell them, like, oh, yeah, no, it's a very Avengers type storyline, very adventurous, very, um, you know, not bright or necessarily cheery, but very high in tone and high in intensity and action.
Hmm. Now, how long have you been working on the story, and was there sort of like a particular event that helped direct you in sort of informing your idea on how the story would go?
So I've always loved crossovers. Like I mentioned, Executioner Song.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Mark Wade's writing on Kingdom Come was very, very influential
Yeah.
in how I write in general. And so I ended up when I honestly still with Concrete Comics before I left them. I actually pitched the bare bones of the story to Concrete Comics, and I because I've always just wanted to write a crossover. As things continued on, and I ended up eventually leaving Concrete Comics, I reworked a lot of the plot. I reworked a lot of the elements to it, and really set set about a really good summary. I approached Lawrence King, who I had known through the industry, and we had a bunch of good conversations. We were really cool with each other, and so I approached him about it and said, hey, I really, really want to do this. Like, let's go. And I think this is where the tenacity kicks in because I really wouldn't really take no for an answer. I pitched what his character was going to do and how Avery was going to work in and out of the story, and he really liked it. And it was kind of off to the races after that. Just setting like the business plan and how we're going to release it and how many issues and just getting all the writing finished up.
And how many years did all this take?
Ooh, so I mean, we're going on. Well, we released it, so we're going on 2 years now. So like, the writing portion was 2 years ago,
Mm.
and or 2 years, yeah, a year and a half basically. We finished up, and so we just need a little bit of time to produce and launch. And we launched the first part about a year and just under 6 months ago.
Now I know you gave a little brief synopsis in the beginning, but for people jumping on board Nightfall for the first time, is there any way you can sort of maybe elaborate a little bit, but without giving away too much of the final issue?
Oh yeah, yeah. So it's not really there's not, well, there is a little bit. There's not much cloak and dagger here,
Uh-huh.
but so Nightfall takes Justice, Caliburn, uh our new entry Lux. Let me go back. Justice is an archangel who comes down to earth and very quickly realizes that the line between heaven and hell isn't so black and white, and he is our flagship character. He's also one of the flagship characters in Nightfall. The next character we have is Caliburn, who is a rogue, and basically he's a demon hunter, and he says demon hunting is his business, and business is good. Um, and Jinx is a regular mercenary, a regular bounty hunter, one of the top in the world, and he's a paramilitary guy who joins the fray. Lux is a teen hero who is just coming into her powers, just figuring everything out as Nightfall commences, and she is the key, as it were. Her is Malachi Bailey's character, who comes from a novel series. She's an elemental immortal who is finding her place in the world. She's just getting over a bout of amnesia, so she's also thrust into this. And lastly, Avery the Astonishing is the signature hero from Constant Hustle Comics, with the power of a dwarf star. Those heroes come together because Merlin, who in our universe is an evil wizard, um, finds or activates, does a couple things to activate a Stargate that will bring Apep from the dimension he's currently trapped in into our world.
Mm.
And according to Egyptian mythology, and this is real Egyptian mythology, Apep was the enemy of Ra, and basically every night he tried to devour the earth. And the reason we have mourning is because Ra beats beats him and banishes him into the darkness of night again. That's why we have the cycle of days and nights according to that mythology.
Got it. Now, when writing your characters, just take Justice for instance. I mean, how much of yourself is in that character?
As far as Justice goes, actually not much, and that's surprising for a lot of people, only because a lot of authors put themselves into their characters. Fortunately for me, I have an entire novel series where I get to do that. So the hero of my novel series, Sir Kyle Hunter, is me. You may have seen it now online. I've posted a couple pictures and stuff like that of something that Keith and Jones actually sketched for
Mm,
me,
yeah, yeah.
and I ended up coloring that. Like, if you look at the, if you know what I look like and you look at the picture, you're just going to be like, oh, obviously, duh. Uh, but Justice is he specifically is not me, but he is a vehicle to answer some questions that I have, or even ask the questions. The duality of human choice, religion versus spirituality, all these different things. So he doesn't actually have my personality, but he does have my, I guess, inquisitive
Mm,
nature.
right, right. Um, Now, when it comes to the creative team for this book, um, who are they, and how did you find them?
Our illustrator is Fabio Samal, and I actually just found him on Facebook. I was up one night at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning for whatever reason, just trolling Facebook, and I saw some of his art, and I thought it was amazing. It looked very dynamic. It reminded me of like Michael Turner or a Jim Lee, and
Hmm.
I love that style. Obviously, Michael Turner was one of my favorite artists before his passing. So I've always wanted that look, and I saw some of his work, and I hit him up. I asked him if he was open for commissions. He said he was. We did like 2 or 3 posters, and after that, I was like, "Hey, man, do you want a contract for this book series? I love your art. I think it's great." And we kind of worked out those details, and we've been off to the races ever since. It's actually very, very beautiful because I don't have to go back and make sure his art is right anymore. When you have an artist, a lot of times you need to go back and forth and make sure this panel looks this way. And there are very, very few times where I have to change any panels that he's done. It's usually he sends them to me for approval and they're already perfect, and I just send them right back. We have that kind of relationship now, which is great, and that reflects in how I write things for him and how he draws things for me.
Mm.
So I'm very fortunate. The colorist for this is Nestor Rajula, and I actually met him when I was still working with Concrete Comics. Nestor has actually colored every comic that I've ever had put out. Um, Personally, all the ones that I've personally written. We've obviously worked with some other colorists and some other artists on other projects for her and Immortalis and different things. But he was my colorist, and he's been my colorist the entire time. He's from the Philippines, and again, I met him through Concrete Comics, and again, it's been off to the races since then. He knows what kind of palettes I want. He knows the moods that I want most of the time, and it's just been a great experience working with both of them.
Oh, power of the internet, right?
Right.
Now, when you turn in your scripts to Fabio, like how in depth, like how are your instructions to him? Are they really elaborate, or are they sort of you give leeway for him to make his own creative adjustments?
A little bit of both. The one thing that initially working with Fabio we had to work on together was characters direction. Right. If you see a guy on panel 1 and he's looking from left to right, and then you go to panel 3 without any turn and he's looking from right to left, your mind doesn't interpret that correctly. So that was like our and that's not even a hurdle, but that was like our biggest hurdle. I think I had to go back once or twice and be like, "Hey, man, switch him from left to right," and that's it. My scripts are pretty in depth in terms of, well, if I have a certain thing that I want to see a certain way, I'll send him the reference, and sometimes he'll send it back and he'll say like, "Yeah, no, I got you, but this will look much better."
Hmm.
And 9 times out of 10, he's completely right. I don't go crazy on distances and line weights or anything like that, but I'm going to definitely set the scene up, and I do panel by panel. Unless I don't have anything, unless I want, there are a couple pages where I'm like, "Hey, man, go wild, this is your thing, you know what should happen here." And then, like I said, he's very adept at translating that, as he should.
Now, were there any challenges during the campaign that you had to sort of overcome, and how did you overcome them?
Campaigns in general are pretty difficult. Also, we all know with the algorithm, there's a lot of shadow banning going on. The algorithm kind of works against you. When we first got into doing Kickstarters, even in campaigns, um, uh, Facebook groups were big. You could drop a post in a group, and if a group had 10,000 people, maybe 1,000 of those people saw it. That's a large margin. Um, Very quickly, though, Facebook just kind of, they didn't do away with groups, but they just made it so you don't see them on your page. They're pretty buried. So that was a major blow to funding and to progress. And we saw that hit really hard for part two, and we just had to overcome it. Unfortunately, we just had to continue to push forward and just just getting out there, talking to people. For lack of better words, doing the grassroots thing.
Are there any parts of the Kickstarter campaign that you'd like to highlight?
Um, the entire campaign is awesome, guys. Go check it out. Yeah. So this campaign is really the culmination of most things. We have all 5 issues digitally you can purchase. We have all 5 issues that you can purchase physically. 1, 2, and 3 have to be add-ons to your physical purchase, but obviously you can get all the issues together. This is the culmination of 2 years worth of work, a lifetime worth of work, a lifetime worth of passion. This is the big game. This is where all the cards are dealt. And so when we say 50 pages of action, it literally is 50 pages of action. And that's only issues 4 and 5. The entire series itself is over 100 pages. I think it's 123, if I'm not mistaken. But it's a labor of true love, and I can say that because I'm the one who did the labor in terms of wanting something, seeing something, and then going for it. I was told that maybe it was too soon. I was told a bunch of, oh, no one's ever going to like it. No one's ever going to care. But you get to a place, or you should get to a place, where you believe in what you're doing and you're doing it good enough to where it's at a high level. And you just have to go for it, and this is us going for it, and we've gone for it at a high level. We've gone for it at a level that's on par with any of the big two or the professionals or whatever you want to call them. We're all about storytelling. We're all about look. We're all about all these things. We're all about comic book creation. I didn't get into comic books so that I could like bounce to movies. You know what I mean? Like put out one comic book and they're going to pick me up as a movie or a series. No, I got into comic books to do comic books. And the love of that is in Nightfall and it's in everything we do. So it's great for anyone who wants to get into a superheroic adventure that is starring Black characters and characters of color, and is still inclusive, and it's a great ending to a series that you've already been following if you have been.
Nice. I'm looking forward to reading all 5 issues when I get it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Like I said, it's for me. It's really fun. I hope that you reach out and tell me what you think about it. I love to hear it. Um, it's just I enjoy it, man. I love it.
I can feel it, man. I, I love having guests like you on the show because it not only is it inspiring, but it just helps me overall, be more motivated to chase my own creative pursuits.
Yeah, you know what? We live in this really crazy time, one, but we also live in this weird society that's like chase your dreams, and then like you do a little bit, and then they're like stop chasing your dreams, you'll never get it. It's weird. It's like a build you up to tear you down kind of thing, and it's very easy to get caught up in all of that. Um, I feel especially when you are a high functioning person that's chasing their dreams because you have high expectations. Um, but stumbling is part of the deal. Right? Not getting everything the way you want it is part of the deal, and just kind of adapting to that is part of the deal. But again, that's not something we're taught. And whereas you might look at you and you're like, oh man, I'm at the beginning of my dreams. Someone like myself, someone outside is like, oh man, this guy he's made it. He's doing the thing. He's got Hall H, man. Like he's doing it. But you see yourself as who you are. And so again, we get kind of lost in that, and that's hard. And unless you have people inspiring you, I just recently colored that picture, and I was in the middle of the process. It's foolish me. I posted it right, and Keithan, to his credit, gave me some really great tips about coloring it.
Hmm.
But my initial mindset was like my pride was there, and it was like, oh, see, you failed because someone you admire told you to change it. And I had to go back and really be introspective and say, no, man, somebody you admire is telling you how to be better. Like you admire this person, listen to them, right? and then go and achieve. And sometimes that gets hard, that gets lost in the myriad of inputs that we get that say, no, you can't, no, you can't, no, you can't. But the truth is, you can. You just need to be reminded sometimes.
Right. And be open to that sort of,
Hmm.
interaction and I guess, not criticism, but, what's a better term? I
I
get,
mean, people say critique, but
yeah,
I don't. A lot of times, I don't even consider them like. So for me, what Keithan did for me wasn't even a critique, right?
uh
But like my ego wanted to take it like that.
right, right, right.
He mentored, from X amount of miles away. And as soon as I really read what he said to do and read, the tips, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And then I did it and the picture looks greater, right? But
Hmm.
again, your ego wants to hear things a certain way because we're so used to hearing that.
Yeah. Speaking of mentoring, I guess we started chatting before the podcast started, and obviously Black Comix Day just sort of happened recently, and you're saying that it's a two day event, and on Sunday you sort of spent some time mentoring other people. Can you sort of elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, yeah. Sunday was more of a, I don't know if calm is the word,
Uh-huh.
but maybe calm. I'll use calm. There were still a lot of people who came through, and there was great foot traffic, and everything was good. But I feel like all of us, and I think we kind of collectively said it, like all of us had more poignant conversations that second day, right? Like that first day was like sell, 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 and the second day was like sell, 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 talk,
Hmm.
sell, 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 talk. And there is a whole, and again, there's an entire generation of, if no one else, there's an entire generation of people of color that have not been exposed to not just being able to do these creative pursuits, but how many people are already doing it. I feel like we're told like, oh, anybody can do it, and yeah, there's a person doing it, and this person, and you see one and one, and that's very hard to reconcile with like, can I do it? Am I going to be the one? But when you get something like Black Comics Day, you have a multitude of Black creators doing a multitude of different creations. You have comics, you have dolls, you have prints, you have candles, you know what I mean, everything there. Um, so I think that it opens up that next generation's ability to see. And I know for the parents that I talked to that were bringing their kids over and stuff, they were happy to have someone who's in the market right now being able to talk to their kids.
Right. I
How
think.
many times in
Yeah.
general do you get a writer, like just a regular writer, anything, and they're going to be able to talk to people and say like, no, you can make a living writing, but you got to do this and this and this, or it can be fulfilling. It's very hard. So that second day was beautiful to kind of take a little bit of a step back and to be able to, for lack of better words, give back to a community that literally just supported us the day before.
Yeah. I mean, every so often I'm a graphic designer by trade, and sometimes I'll participate as a sort of a guest judge at portfolio reviews for graphic design students,
Hmm.
and it's always think of it as an honor to sort of spend some time with each student and give them some sort of advice and pointers on how to not only improve their work but just improve as a person.
Hmm.
So I can see how that Sunday people coming up to you and asking for advice from a professional is such a powerful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. It's actually also humbling too. Like as I said, like we think of ourselves as ourselves, right? And then
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you
yeah.
get a father, or you get a 16-year-old kid, or you get whatever that's like, oh hey, you're so successful. Can you tell me how to do it? And you're like, me? Oh yeah. It's kind of an ego boost and humbling at the same time that you can have that impact because again, you never know. There are experiences that we've all had where we met someone who we thought was the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they may have just said something offhand or very nice to us, but we never let that go. And to think that I could be doing that for somebody else is is immeasurable for me.
Yeah, I hear you because like I'm just a humble little podcast here, and it's hard to like think of myself as having sort of I guess an ability to connect with other people out there in a way that they'll be influenced to do something. Like for instance, I'll be at a show. I was at a show a few years ago. Somebody random just totally comes up to me and said, "Hey, I listen to your podcast with so and so, and I I enjoyed it so much that I bought their books. So it's like, moments like that happen a lot, but I just sort of like take it in stride and sort of can't believe it sometimes,
It's for me. It's the reason I do some of this, at least. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, to again, just to be there for people when they want you to is kind of dope.
Hmm. Yeah. So I guess my last question before we go to superhero shoutouts is are you planning to attend any other in-person comic conventions? I guess to promote your books and other work this year.
So I will definitely be back at AfroCon, and that's like in September.
Mm.
I'm still in flux a little bit during the year, just because our release schedule is so hectic this year. As we launch the new titles, we're launching 7 titles total. So my con appearances might be few and far between this year because okay, so cons are kind of not kind of cons are beneficial for me and for like us, but launching the actual books and the IP is more beneficial for our audience and our fans. And I know that seems kind of counterintuitive, but it's really not when you think about it. Because if we can get them, um, when we get them out or whatever, then we have more material for. I would rather plan for next year
Hmm.
as opposed to spinning my wheels this year. So, like I said, I know I'll be appearing in AfroCon. I'm not sure. I might be at a couple more for the fourth quarter, but then going into 2023, I will be at least at one quarterly.
Gotcha. Hopefully, I can see you at one of the local ones here in California.
Yeah. Well, I'm a hometown boy. I don't.
I
I
see.
won't. I can say I won't be traveling for
Ah.
any this year.
Uh-huh.
Not like big travel.
Right.
So any I do will be here. WonderCon is a no, but maybe LA Comic Con.
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm looking into them still. I don't want to. I don't want to say before I know for sure.
Right. All right. Well, let's go superhero shout outs. Is there a person or a group of people that has helped you along the way that you'd like to say thank you to?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said, Keithan just in the last day or two really helped me with some art and stuff. So that's really awesome. But Keithan's always been a pretty good mentor
Yeah.
and a really good guy. Jason Reeves from 133 Art, Greg Anderson Elise from Webway
Hmm.
Comics, um, Lawrence James King from Constant Hustle, Tony Cottrell from Advent Comics. There are really so many. Jay Allen, Scarlet Knight. Gosh. Lori and Eric Foster from Unlikely Hero Studios. Sarah White as well from Unlikely Hero Studios. Grandmaster Fax, who hosts the Fax podcast. JL Johnson, who's actually part of the team. Again, there are just so many people I'm going to forget because I already have. Please don't be offended if I didn't
It's
mention
right. We
you.
can
You guys know how important you are.
you can mention them on a subsequent podcast. So
Yeah, right. I got to come
that's
back.
right.
We have these new releases and stuff, man. So yeah.
Is there an artist or a writer or other creative that you'd like our audience to check out?
Um, I mean, all the people that I just
Right.
mentioned.
Oh.
Also, TJ Sterling and Newton Little Voice have Villainous on Kickstarter right now. The Savage Sandbox has Crit on Kickstarter right now. Again, that's all I can really think of off the top of my head. Oh, the guys at Fourth Wall Productions, Ace Blade and Lumberjacks and FSK Freestyle Comics, who I will be writing for in the very, very near future. They're great as well. It's just so many. Honestly, there are so many indie comics out there right now that are really, really great. You guys should really dive into indie comics if you're comic book heads and kind of dissatisfied with what you're seeing at Marvel and DC.
Amen to that. Now, is there anything else that we missed that you'd like our audience to know about?
I think we covered it, man. We started off with the Ariana Grande thing, so like I feel like they know everything about me at this
I'm
point.
going to lead with that when I promote this episode. What are the best places to reach you online?
We are Wingless Comics everywhere. So Wingless Comics on Facebook, Wingless Comics on Instagram, Wingless Entertainment on Twitter, and www.winglessent.com. You can also search Wingless Comics on Kickstarter for our current campaign, Nightfall 4 and 5, the finale.
Awesome. And before I let you go, one thing I like to do before we close out the show is sort of have some closing pieces of advice. What kind of challenges have you faced in creating your own media company, and how were you able to overcome them?
Have a plan.
Yeah.
And you're never going to be able, so two things. You're never going to be able to overcome all adversity, right?
Right.
You're going to be able to get past it. You're going to be able to grow from it, but there are always going to be things that pop up. But have a plan. That's one of the biggest things. A lot of people, and have a tangible plan. I see a lot of creators that are like, oh, I'm going to do a comic. But the reason they're doing a comic is so they can get picked up for a movie. That is very few and far between.
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood is a place where you can create, but are you going to be on the inside of Hollywood? Likely not. Also, don't overexpand. And I know I'm saying don't overexpand, as I just said I'm going to launch 7 titles and I got a mini series and a blah, 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 blah. But those are all manageable pieces because they run themselves.
Are you able to delegate some
Exactly. That's exactly what I was just about to say. So each comic series is owned by the creator. So they are responsible for their production. So it's easier to manage that way.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of creators, because they have ideas, or artists, they're like, oh, I got 1,000 characters. No one knows who your 1,000 characters are. And no one cares. No one cares who Justice is. No one cares who Caliburn is. Not until I make them care. And how do I make them care? By putting out consistent material with them in it and explaining who they are and showing why they're cool and on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
So have a plan for how you want to do things and make it be feasible, so that when things come up, you're still okay, so that you can prepare for the eventualities, and also have fun.
Right.
It's going to drive you crazy no matter what this is, no matter what you do. People always say like, oh, if you do a job you love, you'll never work a day in your life. That's completely not true. You work probably twice as hard if you're doing a job you love. You just don't mind it. So realize that you're going to still have to work hard. You're going to still have to do things, but make sure you love it. Make sure you're having fun.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it isn't something you love. Otherwise, it's a labor again.
Right.
But a labor of love is a completely different animal.
So what's the tangible plan, say, for a comic book, like a typical one that you maybe have in mind?
Tangible plan, I would say start with writing.
Mm-hmm.
Learn how to write. Now, there's a difference between writing and being a writer. Learn as much as you can how to be a writer. Because then you're going to get into narrative, you're going to get into character, you're going to get into all these little nuances that sometimes get missed, especially in indie comics. Learn how to prepare and craft a story first. And one of the things that you can do as exercise is Google the term flash fiction. And there will be flash fiction prompts, and they will tell you what you need to do, how many words you need to write, or within what realm of words you need to write to create a full story. It will definitely help you create full stories in short amounts of time. Then get yourself some form of template, comic template. And there are a bunch of different ones, so I never recommend any particular one because it depends on your writing style. So you might have to look through a few to find the one that fits for you. After you've done that, write your script. Get an editor so they can look over it so you don't look stupid, because a lot of writers go out, oh, I don't need an editor, and you end up looking stupid, myself included, because you have typos, you have all these other problems. After you've got a script, then start looking for an artist, and get one that matches, one, your style, and two, your budget. Just because somebody charges $300 a page and their art looks good doesn't mean that's the person you need to go with. You maybe can build up to that, because if you're on a budget and you're spending $300 a page, that doesn't even make sense. That's going to be $10,000 a book, and you're likely not going to make that back on your first time out. After you've gotten your artist, then you go get a color artist. After your color artist, then you do the letters. And again, make sure that you're budgeting these things. Google is your best friend. You can see what the going rates are. You can see the amount of time that's the average, all these different things. And also, as you're doing all of that, because now the book is out of your hands, create a plan for how you're going to release this book to make money so that you can make the next one.
Mm-hmm. So much gold there, man. So much gold, and not just that, but in our whole conversation. I can't wait to re-listen to it.
I appreciate it, man. I had a great time.
Thank you for coming on. You're always welcome, and I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Hall H Show podcast. And thanks to my guest, Brian J. Lambert. Please give him a follow and consider supporting his newest comic book, The Finale for Nightfall, which is available now on Kickstarter until Friday, March 18th, 2022. Even just sharing the Kickstarter link on social media helps a ton. So please share the link if you can. As you know, we love putting the spotlight on independent pop culture creatives like Brian. If you have a suggestion for a potential guest, please let us know by reaching out to us on social media or by filling out our contact form on our website, hallh.com. If you believe in our mission to be the voice of independent creators, we would appreciate a rating, hopefully 5 stars, and a comment on Apple Podcasts. Please spread the word on social media using the hashtag HallHShow. Peace, cheers, and stay safe out there.